Tonight, growing fears of a wider regional war in the Middle East after US troops are killed by Iran-backed militants. Also tonight, no two-horse race. More independents declare their intention to run at this year's ACT election. Could illuminated drone shows replace traditional fireworks displays in the ACT? And Italy's Yannick Sinner shows off his Australian Open trophy after a remarkable come-from-behind victory. Yorma, good evening and welcome to ABC News. I'm James Glenday, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge other people and families with connection to the lands of the ACT. Well, fears of a wider regional war in the Middle East are growing tonight after 3 US troops were killed by Iran-backed militants in Jordan. It is the first time US military personnel have been killed by hostile fire since the Israel-Hamas war erupted. President Joe Biden has vowed to respond, but he's facing intensifying pressure to confront Iran directly.
From the bridge of a British warship, an attack drone fired by Iran-backed Houthis is shot down over the Red Sea. American military bases have also come under fire in Syria, Iraq and now Jordan. This latest strike killing at least 3 US soldiers.
We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases, and we shall respond.
The drone strike hit this US military outpost in Jordan, known as Tower 22, as troops were sleeping. At least 30 others were injured. It's in a strategically important location, at the most northeastern point where Jordan's borders meet Syria and Iraq. A group of Iran-backed factions known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq has claimed responsibility for previous attacks in the region.
This is the tipping point. So 3 US soldiers' deaths is important. The US will have to respond even more strongly than it's done to previous attacks. And that will present dilemmas for both Baghdad and Tehran to respond in turn.
Threatening to put a match to a Middle East tinderbox, juggling multiple crises. Iran-backed Houthi militia have been boarding and seizing international ships for months in the Red Sea. Now they're hitting them with drones and missiles. Retaliatory British and US airstrikes in Yemen doing little to deter the militants. After the first deaths of American troops, fears are growing over the risk of a wider war. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Back home now, and the ACT election may be 9 months away, but campaigning in the capital is already ramping up. A new independent and dozens of Labor candidates have thrown their hats in the ring amidst growing concerns about cost of living pressures.
These heirs of opposing political dynasties are meeting in the middle.
The people that are involved with Independence for Canberra, we're all the sensible centre. I think left and right are unhelpful.
What we've seen with the Labor government, they've been in power for over 22 years. It's the longest serving government in the country. This is too long. They've stopped listening to people across Canberra.
Campaign Director Claire Carnell, a barrister and former Liberal Party member, is the daughter of former Canberra Liberals leader and Chief Minister Kate Carnell, while candidate Tom Emerson, son of former Federal Labor Minister Craig Emerson, works as a staffer for Senator David Pocock. They've yet to release policies, but say issues like housing will be a focus.
To the extent that they're complicated, certainly wouldn't allow candidates to give a soundbite, simplistic, not thought through answer. No light rail, yes light rail. You know what? It's offensive and it's disrespectful because you know what? These are complicated issues.
Something that I've been hearing is that this government's not doing enough to solve the housing crisis, not doing enough on healthcare, not doing enough on education.
The opposition says cost of living pressures will be a major driver for many voters.
It is absolutely clear that whatever measures the Labor Greens government has put into place are not working.
The Chief Minister, who's been spruiking Labor's own suite of candidates for the coming election, thinks the federal government's proposed amendments to Stage 3 tax cuts will do some of the heavy lifting.
80% of ACT taxpayers will receive a greater tax cut than they would have otherwise. It's certainly fairer. It speaks to our values as a party.
Both major parties concede under the Hare-Clark system, winning a majority government is exceedingly difficult, and that makes whoever's holding the balance of power, be it one or more independents or the Greens, in an enviable position to negotiate. Whatever the outcome of this year's election, though, it's far from a two-horse race. Harry Frost, ABC News, Canberra.
There are renewed calls for the ACT government to expand the scope of its voluntary assisted dying laws. A Legislative Assembly committee is examining the plan to legalise the practice. Eligibility is restricted to people over 18 who are suffering intolerably with an advanced incurable condition. Some groups want that change to include younger people or people with dementia using advanced care plans. Meanwhile, religious leaders have maintained their opposition to the bill entirely.
We fall on the side of allowing more choice, but with the safeguards of good support, good information and involvement of support people.
A religious instinct is part of being a human being, and that means a respect, profound respect for life from conception to natural death is part of God's gift to us.
The world's most indebted developer, the Chinese property giant Evergrande, has been ordered into liquidation, owing nearly $500 billion to creditors. The order is likely to send ripples through China's crumbling financial markets as policymakers scramble to contain a deepening economic crisis.
Evergrande, once China's biggest real estate firm, overbuilt and overpromised. Developers powered the real estate boom that boosted the Chinese economy. But now it threatens to stall the country's economic recovery.
A winding up order has been issued.
All of their assets have been suspended.
Evergrande was believed to be a strong investment for middle-class families, hoping property was a safe place to keep their money. But it was not safe. Property prices fell and Evergrande came under pressure as the Chinese government cracked down on the enormous amount of borrowing in the property sector. A huge number of apartments remained vacant. These 14 buildings in southern China, constructed by Evergrande, were never completed.
The worry is hundreds of thousands of Chinese families not getting the flat they thought they were going to live in.
Evergrande first defaulted in 2021. It gained the notorious title of most indebted property developer in the world, owing to mind-blowing debts of around $500 billion, sending shockwaves through global financial markets.
It tried to seek a new debt restructuring plan with creditors, 2 years in limbo until today. A Hong Kong court has ordered the company be wound up, the judge declaring it was time to say enough is enough.
If you were holding on to one of these big property companies thinking that the government somehow was going to step in and underwrite issues, the reality is they're not.
Evergrande can appeal this order, a move that would drag out an already long and complicated process. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News.
Well, there were murders that shocked the nation and left South Australia reeling. Now, after a quarter of a century, one of the 4 men convicted for his part in Australia's worst serial killings, the Snowtown murders, appears set to be granted freedom within months. And victims' families are opposing Mark Hayden's release. James Wakeland has this exclusive State Line investigation.
These are the faces of the victims of the so-called Snowtown murders. For every face, there are families that will never fully recover from what was done to their loved ones in one of Australia's most notorious serial killings.
They've suffered and continue to suffer unimaginable trauma.
Now, almost 25 years after his arrest, one of the perpetrators is set to be freed. Mark Hayden, whose wife Elizabeth was one of the victims, will complete his 25-year sentence in May.
The court has imposed a sentence. Once that sentence is complete, then he would be released from custody.
While his fellow accused, Robert Wagner, John Bunting and James Vlassakis, were convicted of murder, Hayden, who is now 65, was only found to have assisted the offenders, not to have been actively involved in the killings.
It's a very universal view. They would prefer he was never to be released.
The horrific crimes were uncovered by detectives who found decomposing bodies in a bank in Snowtown, 150 kilometres north of Adelaide, in May 1999. In total, 11 people were murdered over a 7-year period. Hayden was given a non-parole period of 18 years and he's applied twice to be released, and it remains possible that he could be paroled even before he served his full sentence.
His institutional behaviour's been very good. He's been easily managed. He hasn't presented problems.
The South Australian government is now considering its legal options.
And if it's possible, impose whatever conditions that the court deems fit on Mark Hayden.
James Vlasakis, who was convicted over 4 of the murders, can apply to be released next year, but the main offenders, Bunting and Wagner, have been told they will never be released on parole. James Wakelin, ABC News.
A drone show to mark the Australia Day long weekend has been declared a massive success, with more than 100,000 people flocking to Lake Burley-Griffin to watch the display. But are drone shows merely a passing fad, or does their popularity mark the beginning of the end for traditional fireworks displays?
The story of Australia up in lights as drones drew crowds of 100,000 to the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin.
They loved the storytelling and the lights and just the vibe, and the fact that it was quiet. People have commented on the fact that it filled them with awe.
Canberra joined London and Dubai on the list of cities ditching fireworks for new technology.
Drones really were a step up from anything else we've tried here in the national capital.
What drones enable us to do is to convey a narrative, and fireworks, it's really difficult.
Ngunnawal Dreamtime Stories led the display, and their clear environmental advantage also makes them attractive. But new technology always comes with a hefty price tag. Canberra's display of 600 drones cost more than $400,000, paid for by the National Australia Day Council.
Currently at the moment they're between 5 and 10 times the price of a fireworks display.
But drones are more economical because we can use drones over and over again.
But there are limitations, as organisers learned when hundreds of drones ended up in the river in 2 separate events in Melbourne and Perth. Hot summer days like this one during our main celebration season are turning some event organisers away from fireworks. But if today was any windier, we might not be able to use this drone. But when the conditions are right, pyrotechnicians don't see drones and light shows as a threat to their craft, but really an opportunity to take entertainment to new heights.
We're also looking to take it to a new level whereby there'll be pyrotechnic effects that will be launched from the drones.
There's a space for a whole range of technologies. Drones worked really well for Australia Day, but other things like lights on the lake or fireworks work really well for other types of celebrations.
Keeping the magic alive with or without a bang. Jade Toomey, ABC News, Canberra.
Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson returns for 2024 and is joined by US Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders.
What's at stake for America if Donald Trump wins the presidency?
Everything is at stake. There are struggles about whether or not nations will remain democratic or move toward oligarchy, move toward autocracy. And certainly if the United States moves in an authoritarian way, it will certainly send a signal to every country on earth that that's the future of politics in this world.
The bill for the $300 million CIT campus at Woden is set to increase by $8 million for high-tech classroom equipment. The ACT government says the extra money will go towards smart screens, audio gear, augmented hearing systems and camera tracking capabilities, as well as a demountable stage and creative arts equipment. The Woden CIT campus is due to open in 2025 with places for more than 6,000 students. Construction is underway with a second crane now on site and a timber frame being installed in the main building.
We need to make sure that it's equipped with the latest technology
and simulated learning environments to make sure that each student that comes through our TAFE campuses is equipped with skills to make them job ready.
2 climate activists have been arrested for throwing soup at the Mona Lisa in Paris. A crowd looked on in surprise as 2 women crossed a security barrier and hurled the hot liquid at the famous artwork. They yelled slogans advocating for a sustainable food system before being arrested. Bulletproof glass protects the Leonardo da Vinci painting, so it wasn't damaged. The battle to dominate Australia's clean energy transition is being fought by billionaires backing electrification or hydrogen. But many hydrogen projects are under pressure as the cost of making EV batteries plummets. In car manufacturing, Toyota is betting big on hydrogen, but critics say it is not paying off.
We're looking out for signs of crime with security guard and company owner Grant Burton.
So doing a general patrol today, he was checking our fence line, looking.
His vehicle emits 0 emissions and it's not an EV. Instead, it's powered by hydrogen.
If we have to plug in and go down the lines of recharging a car, we're looking at 8 hours off the road.
Welcome back.
Grant staff take their vehicles down to this refuelling station owned by Japanese car maker Toyota.
So obviously today you're only doing a half a refuel, so maybe won't be 5 minutes.
The hydrogen comes out as a sub-zero gas that's made here on site using solar as well as power from the grid and water. Just like an EV, there is no tailpipe on this car. Toyota says that all that's emitted is water vapour, which comes out somewhere under here and apparently is so clean you could water the garden with it. But finding a station is difficult.
The refuelling infrastructure is limited. It's growing, but it's limited.
Just 6 hydrogen cars were sold in Australia last year compared to 87,000 EVs. Energy economists say that even in Japan, where the government is pushing hydrogen, these cars aren't taking off.
The companies that made a big bet on hydrogen vehicles, I think, are a little bit reluctant to let go of the sunk cost.
She says filling up one of these cars will never be as cheap as charging an EV.
You need to be able to make electricity to make the hydrogen really, really, really cheap. And the thing is that when electricity gets really cheap, it becomes even cheaper to run your electric car.
Which could mean that hydrogen cars remain in the slow lane. Amelia Turzon, ABC News.
In just over a week, the RBA will be announcing a decision on whether to lift interest rates again. It is the bank's method, of course, of bringing down inflation, which means the 1/3 of Australians who have a mortgage have been doing the heavy lifting when it comes to taming the economy. It's led some Australians to question how fair the current system is.
Daniel Wigg and his partner bought their home last year, days before the first interest rate rise. They're now paying an extra $1,700 a month on their mortgage.
It's a huge difference, and that's a big hole of money that we don't really have.
The 50-year-old is now working 3 nights a week at a bar on top of his full-time job to make ends meet.
Very fatigued. And I'm not getting any younger, so that's not getting any easier.
Daniel is one of the 37% of Australians with a mortgage. As interest rates on mortgages and business loans rise, in theory, consumer spending goes down, which makes it harder for businesses to put prices up, which brings down inflation.
If we're supposed to carry the burden of this inflation, it should just be more equally distributed.
In the 1950s and 60s, increasing income tax was used to deal with higher inflation.
No government would do that these days. Under current arrangements, it's much more easy for politicians to say to people who are complaining about higher interest rates, oh, that's the decision of the Independent Reserve Bank. It's got nothing to do with us.
It's been suggested using superannuation contribution increases to bring down inflation would impact a broader spread of the population and benefit individuals rather than the banks. But there are some practical problems.
It would require legislation which wouldn't necessarily get through the Parliament, and that means that it would be a much slower response to rising inflation than changing interest rates, which can be done more or less overnight.
And the evidence shows, however painful, raising interest rates works to bring down inflation, meaning for now, mortgage holders like Daniel will have to continue to put in the extra hours to keep the economy in check. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local share market's winning streak continued today with the 6th rise in a row. Here's Alan Kohler.
Woolworths shares went backwards a tiny amount while Coles went up after Woolworths said that things are really tough in New Zealand at the moment, so it's writing down the value of its Kiwi business by $1.5 billion and also booking a loss of $200 million on the value of Dan Murphy's. But these are book entries, not actual cash, so investors weren't too bothered. Apart from that, banks went up, miners went down, and the All Ordinaries had its 6th consecutive rise. Oh, and the Australian green cement technology business, Calix, acquired some cement shoes after reporting that it has to relocate a low-carbon cement project in Germany from Hanover to somewhere else. They're not sure where yet. The Shanghai stock market was untroubled by the liquidation of the Evergrande Group, which was well anticipated. It has collapsed, owing more than $500 billion, so its debts are larger than the market value of the entire Australian banking system. The debts are obvious and the creditors numerous, but the liquidators might have some trouble finding and seizing the assets. On commodity markets, oil and iron ore went up, copper and gold went down, and the Australian dollar edged a little higher, still under 66 US cents. Now, the nation's economists are starting to produce their reports on last week's Stage 3 tax announcement. Here's a chart from CBA showing the tax-to-income ratio overall for the whole country. Huge rise from bracket creep since 2008. Bit of a fall in 2018 with stages 1 and 2 of the Morrison government reforms, and then another big rise and a bit of a fall from stage 3, Mark 2. Net change overall lately, not much. And that's finance.
To sport now, and in tennis, newly crowned Australian Open men's champion Jannik Sinner is still absorbing his maiden Grand Slam win after a night of celebration. The 22-year-old staged an astonishing fight back from 2 sets down to beat Daniil Medvedev in 5 thrilling sets. In doing so, Sinner became the first Italian man to win at Melbourne Park in a result that signals a new era in men's tennis.
Bleary-eyed but calm and content, Jannik Sinner held a Grand Slam trophy for the first time, just hours after the most significant milestone of his young career.
I didn't sleep much, but it's, great emotions, slowly realizing what I've done. It's a great achievement for me and my team.
Sinner seals the deal with an epic comeback.
Victory in the most unlikely of circumstances. An early finish appeared certain when Daniil Medvedev controlled the opening 2 sets.
And Medvedev taking charge of this final.
But a steely Sinner showed composure beyond his years.
And he's got it. He's back in this match. What an effort.
He won the next 2 sets, and as fatigue set in for the Russian, Sinner seized the moment, bringing the crowd to their feet, including superfans the Karate Boys. Sinner's maiden major is another step for the next generation in men's tennis, although the 22-year-old is not thinking about Novak Djokovic's record just yet.
I'm just happy that I have this trophy for this year, and then we see what's coming.
For Medvedev, it was 3rd time unlucky in Australia.
I wanted to win. I was close. Was I really close or not? Tough to say, but was not far.
After another tournament featuring late-night finishes, organisers are searching for ways to shorten matches. They've proposed to eliminate lets.
The extra time that it took over these 2 weeks of the event was over 15 hours. So it's significant.
Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
Australia has reaffirmed its position as the best team in world netball by defeating England 69-49 in the Nations Cup final. The victory is Australia's biggest over England in 8 years, with star goal shooter Sophie Garben making 31 of her 32 attempts to win Player of the Match. Australia went through the tournament undefeated and has now won every trophy it has challenged for since 2022.
It's hard to win here, it's hard to win international netball, and that's been our theme for this game. And I thought they came out of the blocks hard, and, you know, we built momentum, but everyone kept supporting each other. And then, you know, to be able to inject the changes and keep winning the fourth quarter was, you know, it's really pleasing.
The Socceroos have set up a blockbuster quarter-final clash at the Asian Cup against either Saudi Arabia or South Korea after they defeated Indonesia 4-0 last night. Australia went ahead from a deflected strike from Jackson Irvine. That lead was doubled before half-time when Martin Boyle got on the end of this excellent cross. Late goals from Craig Goodwin and then defender Harry Suter added some gloss to the Socceroos win ahead of what will be a tough quarter-final.
We've got 4 days break now, and you know, we'll go and watch their game in the next couple of days. And you know, as I said, I truly believe that this result will build the belief even more in the group.
Now, it's a story that sounds like fiction. A group of friends in England start their own football team and take it to stratospheric heights. As Elias Kluwer reports, the Dorking Wanderers are showing the world how it can be done.
30 kilometres from the centre of London, a football fairy tale in the making.
£5 a goal from now, paid Saturday. Oh, yes!
This is Mark White and his unlikely, rough-around-the-edges success story, the Dorking Wanderers.
Me and my mates, we were going to Premier League football, and we got a bit bored of it, and we just thought we'd start playing, have a fun side on a Saturday. It was just a social thing. We was in basically the equivalent of like Division 17.
The affable Londoner working a 9-to-5 job started what's known as a park team. Social football, anyone can play. Dorking kept winning, being promoted to higher and higher leagues, right up to the semi-professional National Conference League.
We've had 12 promotions, we've done really well. I've learned an awful lot as I've gone along.
Despite having no experience in coaching, Mark's colourful management style has not only been successful, it's earned him a worldwide following. Dorking's behind-the-scenes TikTok has over 17 million likes.
You must be bored. You must be bored. Whatever, mate. Not been a store or something.
As Dorking grows into a formidable football force, Mark continues to own, run and coach the club.
So Dorking's gone from playing on a park to a relatively impressive field, but its next step will be its biggest one yet, to the EFL, which is home to the biggest and richest clubs in England.
We just want to keep driving forward and embracing people on our journey, you know.
The Wanderers are daring to dream of one day reaching the Premier League. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Dorking.
To the weather now, and tonight's viewer photo comes from Sue Taylor, who snapped this lovely shot at sunset at the lake. Thank you, Sue. And to all of you, please keep sending your best photos in. Now, after a low of 15 degrees at 6:12 this morning, we reached a high of 32 degrees at the airport, and in Tuggeranong, it was a glorious morning to be outside. Around the region, 31 in Bega and Nowra today, 29 in Cooma, 20 degrees at Thredbo Top Station and 35 degrees in Wagga. In the capitals, Brisbane got to 31, Sydney 29 and Melbourne 27. Today, our part of the nation was mostly cloud-free, but on the synoptic you can see a trough deepening over inland New South Wales, which might contribute to some unsettled conditions midweek. Tomorrow, Brisbane should be cloudy and there's a high chance of a shower or two in Sydney. Melbourne's headed for about 24. In our region, 36 degrees is forecast for Wagga, about 33 degrees for Yass. Some coastal showers are likely, particularly about Nowra and maybe up into the Southern Highlands as well. Inland and in the mountains, low-level heatwave conditions are still forecast. It's the sort of conditions we get in summer. And here in Canberra and Queanbeyan, it will be cloudy. After a low of about 17, we should reach around 29 degrees. Sunrise is 6:14 and sunset is 8:17. And looking ahead, a shower is possible on Wednesday, 31 forecast for Thursday, 32 for Friday, 29 on Saturday and 34 degrees on Sunday. And that is the latest from the Canberra newsroom for this Monday evening. Good luck to all the children starting school tomorrow. I'm James Glenday. It is always lovely to be with you. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson. And until tomorrow, good night.